Once upon a time, in the shimmering golden kingdom of Isoda, there lived 3 princesses, each as distinct from the others as the sun, moon, and stars. At the heart of their tale was the eldest, Princess Marina, a woman whose beauty seemed almost otherworldly. Her radiant smile could halt conversations, and her graceful poise left artists scrambling to capture her essence in paint and verse. But if Marina's beauty was a gift from the heavens, her pride was a fire stoked entirely by her own hand. "I am the smartest, the loveliest, and undeniably the most important person in this kingdom," she often proclaimed with a flick of her golden hair, her words dripping with unshakable confidence. Whether she stood before the mirror or an adoring crowd, Marina carried herself with the certainty of someone who believed the entire realm revolved around her very presence. And perhaps, for some, it did. The second princess, Anicia, was the very embodiment of leisure, a stark contrast to Marina's proud ambition. While her elder sister basked in admiration, Anicia preferred the quiet shade of the kingdom's oldest Mariala tree, where time seemed to slow just for her. There, Shed reclined lazily on a patch of soft grass, nibbling on sweet jelly plums that stained her fingers with their sticky juice. "Why waste energy doing today what can just as easily wait until tomorrow?" Shed murmured, her voice soft and unbothered, like the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. With a languid stretch, Shed sprawled out further, her posture that of a contented cat soaking up the sun. To Anicia, life was a series of moments meant to be savored, not rushed, and no amount of royal duty could convince her otherwise. And then there was the youngest, Princess Halle, whose very existence seemed to defy the kingdom's expectations. Unlike her sisters, Halle was born without a single strand of hair, a trait that many whispered about behind cupped hands. Some even cruelly nicknamed her the hairless princess, but Halle had a spirit far too bright to be dimmed by petty words. "Who needs hair when I've got a head full of ideas?" She'd say with a mischievous grin, her voice steady and sure. Her wit was sharper than any courtier's and her ideas often ingenious, but her sisters rarely paid her much mind. To them, Halle was simply the odd one out, an anomaly in their picture-perfect royal family. Still, Halle didn't let their dismissal bother her. While Marina preened and Anicia lounged, Halle poured herself into the things that mattered to her, inventing clever tools, solving problems no one else could, and imagining a future where being different wasn't something to be whispered about, but celebrated. When their father, a wise and beloved king of Isoda, passed away, he left behind not only a grieving kingdom but also an unusual legacy. The throne was to be shared by his 3 daughters. At first, the arrangement seemed hopeful, a chance for their unique qualities to balance one another and lead the kingdom into a prosperous future. But hope soon gave way to chaos. Marina, with her dazzling beauty and towering pride, believed she alone was fit to lead. "The people need someone strong and capable, someone like me," she declared, her voice brimming with certainty as she dismissed her sister's ideas without a second thought. Anicia, on the other hand, found the responsibilities of ruling far too exhausting to bother with. "Can't we deal with it tomorrow?" She'd sigh, retreating to her favorited spot beneath the Mariala tree, leaving important decisions to gather dust. Even Halle, clever as she was, stumbled. Her bold ideas often veered into overconfidence, and her frustration at being ignored by her sisters sometimes led her to make hasty, untested decisions just to prove herself. Their differences, which could have been their strength, instead became their undoing. They squabbled over every matter, from the simplest trade disputes to the most pressing issues of state. Their indecision left the kingdom adrift, and the people, once united under their father's wise rule, now found themselves divided and leaderless. The golden kingdom of Isoda, once a beacon of harmony, teetered on the edge of disarray, its fate resting on the shoulders of 3 princesses who couldn't see past their own flaws. In a quiet, unremarkable village far from the glittering halls of Isoda, there lived a poor farmer's son named Amuyi. Though his pockets were nearly empty, his mind was sharp, and his heart held little room for scruples. When word of the princess's failing rule reached his ears, A sly smile crept across his face. Isoda, he thought, was rich in gold but weak in leadership, a perfect opportunity for someone clever enough to seize it. Amuyi wasted no time. Selling off 1/3 of his father's modest farmland, he turned the meager earnings into the tools of deception. He bought himself a sleek, polished car that gleamed like a royal chariot, tailored clothes that whispered of wealth and status, and the confidence of a man who knew he could fool even the wisest of kings, or in this case, 3 struggling princesses. Reinventing himself as a charming and mysterious prince from a faraway land, Amuyi set off for the Golden Kingdom, his sights set not on helping the realm, but on exploiting its riches. He rehearsed his lies as he drove, perfecting the tone of his voice, the sparkle in his eye, and the mask of nobility he would wear. For Amuyi wasn't just heading to Isoda to seek opportunity, he was planning to take it no matter the cost. When Amuyi arrived at the grand palace of Isoda, he was greeted not with suspicion, but with open doors and curious eyes. The 3 princesses, each struggling in their own way, were instantly enchanted by the dashing stranger who carried himself with the poise of royalty and spoke with a silver tongue. To Marina, he offered flattery so dazzling it nearly outshone her own reflection. "Your beauty humbles the stars themselves," he whispered, his gaze lingering just long enough to make her blush. "In my homeland, there is no jewel as precious as your smile." She drank in his words like honey, her pride swelling with every compliment. To Anicia, he painted a vision of indulgence. "Why should a woman of your grace and charm trouble herself with the burdens of the throne?" he said with a knowing smile. "A life of ease and luxury awaits you by my side, one where you'll never have to lift a finger again." Her eyes sparkled at the thought, and for the first time in ages, she sat up with interest. And to Halle, he spun tales of adventure and intellect, weaving a narrative where she was the heroine. "You are unlike anyone I've ever met," he told her, his voice low and sincere. "I see in you a mind sharper than the finest blade. Imagine what we could accomplish together, a partnership of brilliance." Halle, so used to being dismissed, felt a spark of recognition and excitement she had never known. What none of the sisters realized was that Amuyi's charm was a weapon, carefully crafted for each of them. He had studied them well, knowing exactly which strings to pull to win their hearts. And so, each sister, blinded by his words and unaware of his duplicity, fell deeply, madly in love with him, setting the stage for a dangerous game that would soon spiral out of control. It wasn't long before the truth came to light, and when it did, it hit the 3 princesses like a thunderclap. Marina, Anicia, and Halle. All of them had fallen for the same man. The realization left them reeling, their hearts heavy with betrayal and confusion. For a fleeting moment, their pride, laziness, and intellect clashed, each sister tempted to stake her claim. But then, in a rare moment of unity, though not necessarily wisdom, they hatched a plan they believed to be ingenious. "Why should we fight over him?" Marina declared, her tone filled with the certainty that shed outsmarted fate. "Exactly," Anicia chimed in, stretching lazily in her chair. "It sounds like far too much effort to compete. Well, just share him." Halle, though skeptical, eventually nodded, her mind racing with calculations. "If he loves us all, then why not let him marry all 3 of us? ITLL, keep the peace, and no one will feel left out." And so, in their heartbreak and misguided logic, the 3 sisters struck a foolish pact. They convinced themselves it was the perfect solution, a clever way to avoid jealousy and preserve their fragile bond. What they failed to see, however, was that their decision wasn't born of love or strategy. It was desperation, a compromise that would soon test the limits of their already fractured kingdom. The grand wedding day arrived, a spectacle unlike any the kingdom of Isoda had ever seen. The 3 princesses, radiant in their bridal finery, stood before the court and villagers, their faces aglow with love and anticipation. Amuyi, dressed in princely elegance, wore his most disarming smile. As the ceremony concluded and the cheers of the crowd began to subside, Amuyi stepped forward, raising a hand to silence the hall. "My beloved princesses," he said, his voice smooth and melodic, "today marks the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. But before we settle into our lives here, I wish to propose a gesture of trust, love, and unity." The crowd leaned in, curious, as Amuyi continued. "You've heard so much about my homeland, my distant kingdom filled with wonders beyond imagination. What better way to begin our union than with a honeymoon adventure? You three will journey to my lands, where you can experience its beauty for yourselves." The princesses exchanged intrigued glances, their interest piqued. But before they could respond, Amuyi added with a dazzling smile, "While you explore and enjoy my kingdom, I will remain here to manage Isoda in your absence. It will be a symbol of trust, our faith in one another as partners, as rulers, and as family." The court erupted in murmurs at the boldness of the suggestion, but the princesses, still drunk on love and blinded by his charm, saw nothing amiss. It seemed to them like the perfect plan. The villagers, too, applauded the idea, unaware that they had just witnessed the opening move in a conman's dangerous game. Marina could barely contain her excitement at the thought of visiting a foreign kingdom. She beamed, imagining the adoration she would receive as a visiting queen. The idea of dazzling an entirely new audience with her beauty was too tempting to resist. "Imagine how they'll adore me," she gushed, already picturing herself as the center of attention at grand feasts and royal celebrations. A queen like no other, admired by all. Anicia perked up at the thought of a vacation far from responsibility. Predictably, she saw things from an entirely different perspective. No royal duties, no meetings, just endless days of lounging in luxury. She murmured with a contented sigh, "This is perfect. I'll finally get the rest I deserve." For her, the trip was nothing more than an extended vacation, a chance to escape responsibility altogether. But Halle was less convinced. Her curiosity burned to see if his kingdom truly lived up to his grand tales. Her sharp mind couldn't help but prod at the holes in Amuyi's plan. "Why must we leave our kingdom in the hands of someone we've only just met?" she asked, her tone serious and questioning. "Shouldn't trust be earned, not given so freely?" Her words hung in the air for a moment, but Marina waved them off with an impatient toss of her golden hair. "Halle, stop worrying so much. Amuyi loves us. He's doing this for us. Besides, what could possibly go wrong?" Even Anicia managed to muster some enthusiasm, lazily prodding Halle. "Come on, it'll be fun. You're always so serious. It's time to relax for once." Caught between her doubts and the pressure of her sisters, Halle hesitated. Deep down, her instincts screamed at her to resist, but her love for Amuyi muddled her thoughts. After all, hadn't he made her feel seen and valued when others hadn't? Reluctantly, and against her better judgment, she nodded. "Fine," she said at last, though her voice was uncertain. "But if something goes wrong, don't say I didn't warn you." Her sisters laughed off her concerns, already too swept up in their dreams of adventure and luxury to listen. Meanwhile, Amuyi smiled to himself, the gleam in his eye betraying none of the schemes swirling in his mind. The day of their departure arrived with great fanfare, though not everyone in the palace shared in the excitement. The late king's loyal chamberlain, Abe, stood in the shadows of the bustling courtyard, his face drawn with worry. "Your Highnesses," he implored, stepping forward to address the three princesses, "this journey is unwise. Your father always said to beware of the smooth-tongued. Trust should never be given blindly, especially to a man we know so little about." But Marina brushed him off with a flick of her wrist. "Oh, Abe, you worry too much. We are queens now, not children to be lectured. Besides, we can take care of ourselves." Anicia, already reclining in her carriage, let out a lazy laugh. "Yes, Abe, save your breath. We're going on a honeymoon, not a war campaign." Only Halle paused, her instincts flaring again at the chamberlain's words. But when Marina rolled her eyes and Anicia waved her over impatiently, she sighed and climbed into her carriage. "It'll be fine," she muttered, though the words felt hollow. The journey began with grandeur, Amuyi's sleek carriages gleaming as they wound their way out of the Golden Kingdom. The princesses chatted eagerly about the wonders awaiting them, but as the days passed, the paved roads gave way to dirt trails, and then to rugged paths barely wide enough for the carriages to pass. The lush countryside grew wild and unkempt, the trees closing in like a canopy of secrets. By the time they arrived at their destination, the princesses were stunned into silence. Amuyi's so-called kingdom was nothing but a ramshackle hut perched in the middle of an overgrown clearing. The windows were broken, the roof sagging, and the surrounding land was untamed wilderness. Marina stepped out first, her mouth agape. This can't be it," she stammered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Anicia groaned, sinking onto a nearby log. "Tell me this is a joke. Please, someone tell me this is a joke." Halle, her suspicions now fully realized, clenched her fists. "We've been tricked," she said, her voice cold and sharp. Amuyi never had a kingdom. This was all a lie. They quickly searched for their map to lead them back home, but excited Marina torn it as soon as they located the pathway that led to the so-called Kingdom of Amuyi. Their troubles didn't end there. Soon, the supplies Amuyi had provided, small crates of food and water, proved to be woefully inadequate. Within days, they were left with nothing, forced to scavenge for berries and firewood in a wilderness they didn't know how to navigate. The luxurious life they had imagined crumbled into a harsh, unforgiving reality. Marina's beauty did nothing to charm the wilderness. Anicia's laziness left her hungry and frustrated, and even Halle's cleverness couldn't solve the problem of their dwindling resources. They were queens no longer, just three sisters abandoned in the wild with no choice but to fend for themselves. Marina, who had once preened before gilded mirrors and reveled in the adoration of the court, now found herself struggling to carry buckets of water from a distant stream. Her once pristine hands were blistered, and her golden hair, once her crowning glory, was tangled and dull. She muttered bitterly with each step, her pride bruised far more than her aching shoulders. Anicia fared even worse. The mere act of walking left her drained, her untrained body unprepared for the harsh demands of survival. By the third day, her strength gave out entirely, and she fell ill from exhaustion and hunger. She lay beneath a tree, shivering and pale, unable to do more than whisper complaints. That left Halle, the youngest but the most resourceful of the three, to shoulder the burden. She scavenged for edible plants, built makeshift shelters, and tried to keep her sisters alive. But even Halle, clever as she was, could not fight the relentless hunger or the creeping despair. She pushed forward, her determination the only thing keeping them moving, until one fateful day when they stumbled upon the edge of a small, modest village. The sight of smoke rising from chimneys and the sound of voices brought tears to Halle's eyes. They had found civilization at last. Desperate, the sisters dragged themselves into the village square, their regal bearing long since stripped away. They looked like beggars, gaunt and filthy, their fine wedding gowns reduced to tatters. It was a kind healer who first recognized them. An elderly woman with sharp eyes and a gentle touch. She gasped as she studied their faces. You're the princesses of Isoda, aren't you?" she asked, her voice filled with shock and concern. The villagers quickly gathered, murmuring in disbelief as they pieced together the story of the princess's plight. Despite their ragged appearance, the people's loyalty to the royal family burned strong. They brought food, warm blankets, and care for Anicia's illness, their kindness a balm for the sisters' wounded pride and spirits. Within days, a band of villagers organized themselves to escort the princesses back to their kingdom. Armed with little more than determination and an unwavering sense of duty, the villagers vowed to see their queens returned to their rightful place. As the sisters prepared to leave, Halle stood quietly by the healer's side. "Thank you," she said sincerely, her voice soft but steady. "We don't deserve this kindness, but we'll repay it one day. I swear it." The journey back to Isoda began, the sisters humbled and exhausted but alive, carried by the devotion of the people they had once neglected. They had left as queens full of pride and naivety, but they returned as something far different. 3 women on the brink of transformation, with a kingdom waiting for their redemption. Back in Isoda, Amuyi moved like a shadow through the gilded halls of the palace, wasting no time in enacting his schemes. Charming the greedy elders on the council with false promises of shared wealth and power, he convinced them to sell off half their royal treasures. Gold, jewels, and priceless artifacts disappeared overnight, loaded onto wagons that vanished beyond the kingdom's borders. The coffers, once brimming with Isoda's wealth, were emptied for Amuyi's personal gain. The people, unaware of the full extent of his betrayal, began to sense that something was wrong. Taxes were raised, services neglected, and whispers of discontent rippled through the streets. The palace that had once gleamed with splendor now stood eerily quiet, its opulence stripped away. By the time the princesses returned, escorted by the loyal villagers, their home was barely recognizable. The golden gates hung askew, the gardens were overgrown, and the grand halls echoed with emptiness. The people gathered outside the palace, their faces weary with worry and unrest. When the sisters entered the throne room and saw the hollowed-out space that had once been their father's legacy, their rage was immediate. Marina's face twisted with fury. Anicia, usually so indifferent, clenched her fists, and Halle's sharp eyes burned with resolve. "Where is he?" Halle demanded, her voice cold as steel. It was Abe who stepped forward, his face weary but relieved to see them. "He's still here," the chamberlain said. His greed blinded him. He grew too confident and stayed too long. With Abe's help, the sisters worked quickly. The loyal guards and villagers rallied behind them, eager to restore justice. Amuyi was dragged from his chambers, his once charming smile replaced with a look of panic as he faced the wrath of the sisters he had deceived. Alongside him were the corrupt elders who had aided his schemes, their heads bowed in shame as the people jeered. Halle stepped forward to speak, her voice cutting through the tense air. "Amuyi came to us as a liar and a thief, and with your help," she said, turning her glare on the elders. "He nearly destroyed our kingdom. But this is where it ends." Under their orders, Amuyi and the elders were imprisoned, their ill-gotten wealth seized and returned to the kingdom. Though the treasury was nearly empty and the palace stripped of its grandeur, the people gathered to celebrate the princess's safe return. Bonfires lit the night as villagers danced and cheered, their faith in their rulers renewed. For the sisters, the celebration was bittersweet. They had reclaimed their home, but the kingdom was in ruins, and their father's legacy lay in tatters. Marina, Anicia, and Halle stood together on the palace balcony, watching the joyous crowd below. "This isn't over," Halle said softly, her gaze steady. "We have a long road ahead." "But at least now," Marina added, her voice quieter than usual, "we're on it together." Anicia, leaning heavily on the balcony rail, managed a small smile. "And maybe this time, it'll actually help," she said, drawing a surprised laugh from her sisters. The 3 of them stood united, humbled by their mistakes, but determined to rebuild Isoda stronger than ever. For the first time, they understood that ruling wasn't about pride, comfort, or ambition. It was about earning the trust of their people and protecting the legacy they had almost lost. The ordeal transformed the 3 princesses, leaving them humbled and far wiser than before. Marina, once so consumed by her own beauty, came to understand its fleeting nature without substance behind it. "Pride may shine bright," she confessed one day, her voice softer, "but it blinds you to the truth. True beauty is found in compassion and wisdom." She began using her charm not for vanity, but to inspire and uplift her people. Anicia, who had spent her life avoiding effort at every turn, found a surprising strength in hard work. As she rolled up her sleeves to help rebuild the kingdom's crumbling walls, she smiled and said, "I used to think rest was my reward, but now I see that effort brings true fulfillment. Building something with your own hands, it feels real." Her transformation became a source of inspiration for even the laziest villagers. Halle, the youngest and sharpest, had her own lesson to reflect upon. I doubted myself, she admitted one evening, standing in the very chamber where Amuyi had begun his deception. Even when I knew something was wrong, I let others silence my instincts. Never again. With renewed confidence, she vowed to always stand firm in her convictions, no matter who questioned her. Together, the three sisters made a promise. They would rule as one, setting aside their personal desires to focus on the needs of their people. For the first time, their differences became their strength. Marina's charisma, Anicia's newfound dedication, and Halle's intellect worked in harmony, forging a leadership that was greater than the sum of its parts. Under their united rule, the kingdom of Isoda began to flourish again. The coffers were rebuilt, the palace restored, and trust between the rulers and their people grew stronger than ever. The sisters walked among their people, not as distant queens on a throne, but as humble servants of the realm, earning the love and respect they had once taken for granted. Moral of the story: pride, laziness, and overconfidence can lead even the strongest to ruin, but humility, hard work, and wisdom can rebuild what is broken. True leadership comes not from titles, beauty, or power, but from a willingness to serve others selflessly and learn from one's mistakes. And so, the Golden Kingdom of Isoda, once on the brink of collapse, thrived under the rule of three sisters who finally understood the weight and the honor of the crowns they wore. The end.